Week 11 of the NFL season is officially here, so in today's video, let's go ahead and try and predict every single game of week number 11. But with that said, if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button, but let's just hop right into it. And we are going to begin with the Washington Commanders versus the Philadelphia Eagles on Thursday Night Football. This game should be a really entertaining game between two very fun offenses. Obviously, this is going to be a really good test for the Washington Commanders to kind of see where they're at with their current team. Obviously, the expectations for Washington were low coming into the season, but now they're actually pretty high, and now they're going up against a very good NFC East rival that could potentially win the division or even win the entire conference. So for Washington, I don't necessarily think that you have to win this game to prove who you actually are, because I think so far you've proved a lot of things. But if you are able to beat a team like Philadelphia, that definitely does move you into that upper echelon of, what you could be. Right now, I kind of think Washington is one of those teams that could make the playoffs, but likely isn't going to make a very deep run. But if you beat a Philadelphia team, who knows? For Philadelphia, this is a good test to sort of see where you're actually at with your season. The offense hasn't been perfect, but it has been better so far lately. So if you can beat a really good team like Washington, I think it does sort of further solidify your spot as one of the best in the NFC. In terms of actually who I think will actually win this one, I do think Philadelphia, with their experience and with their explosive weapons on the outside, will be able to create enough problems for this Washington defense. Washington does typically play Philadelphia pretty well, so I expect a really close and tight game, but I think Philadelphia will win 27-24. Moving on, we have the Miami Dolphins versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, I believe the Raiders are coming off of their bye week, whereas the Miami Dolphins are coming off a pretty solid victory and kind of getting back in the right direction. And even though Las Vegas in the secondary has been okay this year, I expect Miami to have really their big breakout game in this performance. Ultimately, that Raiders offense just is not very good, and I think they're going to give a ton of opportunities to Tua and to Tyreek Hill to allow them to have a pretty solid day offensively. And because I don't think Las Vegas is going to be able to keep up with their offensive production and with their stars, I do expect Miami to win this one pretty handily. I have the final score 31-17. Moving on to the New Orleans Saints versus the Cleveland Browns. These are both two teams that are really struggling in terms of rankings right now. They don't have a bunch of victories, and they're really just not very good teams. However, both these teams are kind of moving in the right direction since a couple things have happened. For the Saints, it's the firing of Dennis Allen, and for the Browns, it's obviously the injury to Deshaun Watson. This is going to be a very interesting matchup because these are two teams that had a big spark moment, with the Browns having that big performance from Jameis Winston versus the Ravens, and for the Saints, obviously last week going up against the Falcons, that was sort of your big momentum. But for Cleveland, their momentum came down drastically the following week, so I kind of wonder if that similar thing could happen here to the New Orleans Saints. Ultimately, though, this Saints defense is still really good. It still has a lot of quality pieces, and because Jameis Winston just hasn't proven to be a guy who can beat quality defenses, I do think ultimately the Saints will find a way to win this one, with Derek Carr and with Alvin Kamara just having big days. I do expect a low-scoring affair with probably a lot of turnovers, a lot of sloppy football, and all that fun stuff, so expect kind of a fun game that isn't too serious, but I think the Saints will win 17-13. Next up, we have the New York Jets versus the Indianapolis Colts. Now, Indianapolis is going with Anthony Richardson, which I do think is the right move. Ultimately, I would have made that move last week, but they didn't decide to do so, and this week he is going to be the starting quarterback, and I expect him to have a really solid day on the day, because you're going up against a Jets defense that, quite simply put, has been unbelievably disappointing ever since Robert Saleh has been fired. They're not really good at tackling, they're not really good at stuffing the run, and even their pass defense has been very suspect this year. All things that they were really good at the past couple years, they're just not good right now. And even though I think Aaron Rodgers and that offense is okay and is able to move the ball and put up points, I don't know if they're going to be able to outscore a Colts team that I think is going to be firing on all cylinders versus a terrible Jets defense for whatever reason. With Anthony Richardson back, with Jonathan Taylor back, I expect them to run the ball a crap ton. I don't honestly expect Anthony to throw the ball all that much. Of course, he will have to, and he will throw the ball eventually, but I expect a lot of rushing plays with both those guys. And if those guys could be productive and average like 4 yards a carry, it could be night-night for the Jets. So I'm going to pick 26-18 towards Indianapolis. Moving on to the Minnesota Vikings versus the Tennessee Titans. Now, Tennessee is, simply put, just one of the worst teams out there. And even though Minnesota has been struggling a little bit offensively lately, I do expect them to find a way to win this one, kind of like they have been the past couple weeks, where it isn't pretty, but they also just find a way to win. For the Vikings, I really just want to see this team not turn the ball over, especially when they get in the red zone. Just execute a little bit better than how they have the past couple weeks. And if they can do so, I think this one should be a pretty sizable win for them. But again, if they have some turnovers and if they can't effectively be an efficient offense, then I do think this game could be a lot closer than it really should be. But ultimately speaking, even if the Vikings don't have their best day, they will be able to beat this Titans team because this Titans team just really is not that good. And I expect this Vikings defense to give Will Levis fits the entire day. So because of that, I'm going to pick the Vikings 22-10. Next up, we have an NFC North matchup between the Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears. Now, a few weeks ago, this game would have been a lot more interesting, but Chicago has just not been good the past couple weeks. And even though Green Bay hasn't been perfect either, they are coming off a bye week and they have had some really close, performances, and they've had a couple good victories. So I do think Green Bay should be the heavy favorite in this matchup. With that said, I do think Chicago's defense could definitely give Green Bay a lot of issues, maybe force some turnovers, get some sacks, cause some issues for that Packers offense that could maybe keep this game close for a couple quarters. But ultimately, this Bears offense is just really bad right now, and I don't really know who to pinpoint the blame on. Do you blame the offensive coordinator who just got fired? Do you blame Caleb? Do you blame the offensive line? I think you can blame a lot of different pieces. I think you can blame even DJ Moore and the receiving core. But ultimately speaking, just in terms of this game, I think Green Bay should find a way to win. They're just simply put the better team as of right now. So I'm going to pick the Packers to win 28-14. Oh, we're moving on to the Detroit Lions versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. I feel like I don't have to say too much about this one because we should all know how this game goes. The Detroit Lions are going to win this game. Trevor Lawrence is not playing for the Jacksonville Jaguars, so they're going up against Mac Jones, and let's just put it how it is. Mac Jones is just not a good quarterback, and he's going to have a really tough matchup on his hands against the Detroit Lions, who are firing on all cylinders. I expect the Lions to dominate this one from start to finish. This game should not be close, and if it is, maybe we should kind of rethink what this Lions team is, because there's no way in hell this game should even be a competition. With that said, Jacksonville does have some talent. I don't want to just completely dismiss them, but the Lions will win this one 34-13. I think this one isn't even going to be close by the second half. And then moving on to the LA Rams versus the New England Patriots. Now, this is one of those games where I could see either team winning these games because, just simply put, New England just finds a way to win some of these performances. Like, they've actually had a really solid season with Drake May, and Drake May has been honestly really fun to watch. The LA Rams actually have a really solid defensive line led by Jared Verse and obviously a bunch of other guys. That's a really good unit in totality. And I just feel like they could find a way to give New England a lot of fits. I feel like Drake May is going to have a solid day, but maybe won't be able to execute at the highest level when he wants to towards the red zone and so many other places. And because I feel like this LA Rams offense has an opportunity here to go up against a bad team that isn't really as talented as they are, and they could put together a couple drives to kind of fix what their offense has been struggling with lately, I do feel like eventually this Rams team will be able to score enough points to ultimately win this game. New England Patriots have some good pieces. They have some good young talents, but ultimately speaking, this Rams team is a veteran team that has obviously won a Super Bowl and obviously has a bunch of really good young and older players. I'm going to pick the LA Rams to win here because I just haven't seen this Patriots team go up against a quality opponent and beat them. So I am going to pick the LA Rams 21-17. And then we have an AFC North matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers, arguably maybe the best game of the week. We will see. There's a couple really fun matchups later we'll talk about, but this one is definitely a great matchup. For Pittsburgh, this is an awesome opportunity to show that you are actual Super Bowl contenders. I feel like a lot of people, including myself, are a little hesitant to call you contenders because even though you beat Washington, it was a really close game and it's Pittsburgh. You just don't know. But if you go in there and have a really close competitive game or even win against a good team in Baltimore, I think we can start to easily put you in those conversations of being true championship contenders. And that's kind of what I expect to happen in this game. Russell Wilson is going up against a really subpar Ravens secondary. This is a Ravens defense that has been somewhat disappointing this year. Not necessarily all their fault. They have a new defensive coordinator. They also lost a bunch of pieces and they've had a couple injuries. So with that all said, though, it's not like it's a terrible unit, but I do think Pittsburgh will be able to find a lot of success offensively. I think this game just ultimately comes down to which team is going to make a mistake first, because I feel like both these offenses should be able to do what they really want to do the entire day. I don't expect this one to be a very high scoring game. I think that the defenses will put up enough stops, will create some turnovers, will create some sacks and some penalties and all that stuff. But I do expect a relatively, moderately high scoring game. Again, I think both offenses will have fine days. I think Russell Wilson will have a good day. I think Lamar will have a good day. It just kind of comes down to which defense can create more stops, which defense can force more turnovers, and which offense doesn't execute at the highest level. And I just think right now with how Baltimore is playing and how even their run and passing game is, I am going to pick Baltimore to slightly win this one, but I think it's going to come down to the wire, and maybe it could even come down to like a game-winning field goal or a game-winning drive that ultimately shuts the game down. I'm going to pick Baltimore 28-27. And And then we move over to our 3 o'clock window, beginning with the San Francisco 49ers versus the Seattle Seahawks. Now, Seattle has been struggling mightily as of lately. They just simply don't have something not working. Everything just kind of feels like it's good, but it's not going great. Whereas for San Francisco, they're starting to figure some things out. Brock Purdy's there. They just got Christian McCaffrey back. So this team is starting to peak kind of at the right time where they need to start to string together some wins and obviously some divisional wins. And here they are with a great opportunity to get a massive win in the division. For Seattle, you're kind of fighting for your playoff and your division lives right now. You kind of have to win this game or else it kind of feels like the season's already done. This team is way too talented to miss the playoffs. And if they were to lose this game, that would be a really missed opportunity. But when you look at the Seattle Seahawks, they haven't had a marquee win against a very, very good opponent in feels like years, to be honest with you. Yes, they beat the Atlanta Falcons, and that's probably their best win of, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years at this point. They've kind of been owned by Brock Purdy and the 49ers, and I feel like this would be a good opportunity for them to kind of put their foot down and show who they actually are. But I don't think they'll be able to do so. I do think San Francisco will win this game. San Francisco, just simply put, is a better team than Seattle, and they have been the past couple years. So I am going to pick Seattle to lose this one, but I think it'll be pretty kind of competitive and pretty close in terms of score like it usually is. I'm going to pick San Francisco 31-23. Moving on to the Atlanta Falcons versus the Denver Broncos. This is also a game that I feel like could go either way. I'm very split on this one, but I am going to go with a team that I think has been a little bit more proven up to this point. The Denver Broncos are a good team. I like Bo Nix. I like Sean Payton. I like a lot of things on this team moving forward, but they just haven't really beaten too many good teams. Their best win on the season is against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but outside of that game, they don't really have a really good marquee victory versus a bunch of good opponents. They've kind of beaten on a bunch of bad teams. Not to dismiss what they've done. They've had a hell of a season given what we thought they would be. It's just that this Broncos team hasn't, gone up against the likes of, let's say, like a Baltimore or a Houston or a Green Bay and has gotten a win there. They've kind of struggled in those games, but they have, again, they have some good wins. Tampa Bay is a good team, so give them credit where they do deserve it. But we also have to give Atlanta their credit too, because they've also beaten Tampa Bay twice, and they've also had a couple other really good victories. Atlanta, in my opinion, is just a bit more of a talented team. I kind of feel like their offense could have some issues with, obviously, the secondary of Denver, but they just have so many different weapons they can go to, and as long as they don't have a bunch of turnovers, I do expect them to win this one. I think it will be a close game. I think Bo Nix should have a nice day, but again, I just feel like when it comes down to it, I gotta believe in the talent pool and the veteran experience of the Atlanta Falcons more so than this young Denver team that doesn't have as much talent. I am going to pick Atlanta to win 24-20. And then we have maybe the best game of the week. Again, I said something similar about Ravens versus Steelers, but this game could also be up there as well between the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. This game is going to be a really close game, as is basically every single game that both these teams meet. I expect another close, tight, contested game that potentially goes down to the wire, maybe is won by a game-winning field goal or a game-winning drive. This game will be close, as they all are, but I'm actually leaning towards Buffalo to win this one for a couple of reasons. This Bills offense, in my opinion, is one of the better offenses out there. If they can play with Amari Cooper this week, hopefully he will, and I do think he will be able to play, but if they do get him, they get another weapon to add to their already really talented and fun receiving core. Whereas for Kansas City, they just haven't quite yet felt like a complete team on the offensive side of things. Defensively, they're fantastic, and they will be able to generate some stops and maybe create some turnovers. It just comes down for me that I just think Buffalo is a better offense right now than Kansas City. Again, I expect a high-scoring affair. I expect both these teams to play at a high level. I expect some high-level coaching, and I think Andy Reid will be the better coach out there on Sunday. But when it comes down to it, I think Buffalo is a bit more talented on the offensive end. I also just think that they're a little bit better on the offensive end, and because I think Josh Allen is having a fantastic year where he's not turning the ball over, I think that will translate versus this Chiefs team. And because I do think it will translate, I am going to pick Buffalo to win a really close competitive game that looks very similar to a lot of their other performances against both these teams, but I have Buffalo winning 34-31. And then we have our Sunday night football game between the LA Chargers and the Cincinnati Bengals, another really awesome game between two very fun and good teams. Cincinnati's record isn't pretty, but we all know that that is a great team. For the LA Chargers, this is an awesome opportunity to prove that you are actually a good team against, another good team. This is a Chargers defense that has been fantastic on the year, whereas this Bengals offense has been also fantastic on the year. It's a little hit and miss sometimes. Sometimes they can have some down performances, but typically speaking, they are a really solid unit. But in this game, I don't know why, I just kind of have this gut feeling, this utter little bit of confidence in the defense of the LA Chargers to slow down Jamar Chase and to slow down Joe Burrow and that offense. This is a Bengals offense that isn't really even in terms of can they run the football and can they pass the football. And if you can force this Bengals offense to be one-dimensional, it does give you a bit of an advantage. With that said, if you force them to pass the ball 50 times, they will honestly gladly do so because Joe Burrow is an awesome MVP-like quarterback. So that could easily be the outcome of the game. But I'm just going to assume that they're able to stuff both the pass and the run and force this team to be a little bit one-dimensional. And if they could do so, I do think the Chargers will win this game. This is not a very good Bengals defense, although they have been playing better as of late. I am going to ultimately pick the Chargers to prove, though, that they are a great team and they can win this one 24-19. But let's go ahead and move on to the Monday Night Football game between the Houston Texans and the Dallas Cowboys. Now, coming into the season, there was a lot of hype about this game because, you know, the Cowboys were playing good football up to the offseason, and the Texans were one of the most hyped up teams of the offseason. And of course, this felt like a game that would determine who is the Texas team, you know, and this was this fun matchup between the Houston and the Dallas team. And obviously, this game is just nowhere near competitive at this point. For starters, Houston hasn't been as good as advertised. I think a lot of that is due to some injury issues, obviously not having Nico Collins the past couple weeks, who is their number one guy. Stephon Diggs out for the season, and Will Anderson missing the past couple weeks has hurt this team. But you can't talk about injuries without talking about the Dallas Cowboys. No Dak Prescott. CeeDee Lamb's on injuries or has injuries. Brandon Cook's probably going to be out again. They have issues on the offensive line. Their entire defense is banged up. I mean, it's really not comparable. But in this game, the Texans will be able to win this one. The Cowboys are just a complete mess on the offensive end. And because Houston is going to be able to do kind of whatever they want to do against this Cowboys team, I expect this one to not really be all that close. I expect Houston to be able to run the football. I expect them to be able to pass the football. And even if the Cowboys do get Deron Bland back this week, I don't feel like that changes a whole bunch of anything. I do expect Cooper Rush to play better this week because last week was not a good Cooper Rush performance, and I do think he's better than what he showed. But with that said, it will not be a close game. I have Houston winning 34-14. We do have 4 bye weeks this week. Those teams are the Carolina Panthers, the Arizona Cardinals, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the New York Giants. All 4 of these teams desperately could use this bye week. Arizona, though, probably doesn't need a bye week. They honestly would probably rather play because they're on fire right now. But if you guys did enjoy the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button, and I love you guys. Peace.